The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Matthew Darius. I'm the Professional Development Coordinator here at New York SBO. And I'd like to welcome you to the final webinar in our risk management series brought to you between SBO and NYSER. We have a couple different ways you can communicate and ask questions of our presenters today. You can type in the chat window, which is typically on the right-hand side of your screen on the GoToWebinar control panel. I'll be monitoring that the entire time, and I'll make sure to get your question answered. There's also a Q&A screen on your GoToWebinar control panel that gives us more of a threaded messaging type capability, and I'll be monitoring that and making sure our presenters get to you. Or you can ask a question over the phone. In order to do that, you hit the raise hand button on your GoToWebinar control panel. That'll notify me you want to chat with our presenters. Excuse me. And I will unmute you and put you through. So with that out of the way, if you've been with us before, you know our presenters. But if you haven't, we have Jeff Marshall and Lee Gavey here to present our final webinar to you today. Jeff and Lee, it's all yours.
Thank you, Lee. Matt. This is Lee Gavey. Thanks, Matt. I just want to say a few words of welcome to everyone again, and then I'll turn it quickly over to Jeff for the balance of this program. We're very excited to have Jeff back. He is now a veteran of 4 of these webinars with us, and just as a reminder, or maybe for those who haven't heard before, Jeff's background includes having served as the risk manager for the City of Philadelphia Public Schools. He is an attorney and served in the state of New Jersey and the Risk Management and Claims Division of the state, and is a former mayor in his local area, and has a real good sense of the things that are going on in public schools and ways that districts can help reduce and control their losses and risk. Just wanted to say one of the things about Jeff that we've learned over these last 4 months, or 4 sessions, excuse me, is he's very creative, and we've had a number of different elements introduced into this series that we've had a lot of response and questions about, and can we share some of the things, and I believe ASBO is providing a way for everyone to access that. Jeff will also be available to help out if you have specific questions. Today's session is going to have a different look and maybe a little different approach from the previous ones, and I'll let Jeff do a little bit more introduction, but I just want to thank him again for the steadfastness and the creativity. It's been an exciting series, and I'm looking forward to this wrap-up session today. So it's all yours, Jeff. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you also for inviting me to do these seminars. For those of you who have been to the prior seminars, the good news today is no more green board. I think we've gotten past the green board point, and today I'm looking at trying to tie everything that we've done together into a clean package, and at the same time give you some insights as to where you can start taking your programs. So what we're going to be looking at are 2 different types of things that school business officers can do. Some of them are full programs, and some of them are thought processes. So let's get moving with them. If I can get our system to work here. There we go. The first is establishing a gain share program. Now, I've mentioned this in passing in a couple of our webinars, but I wanted to get into that this time a little bit more deeply. We started off talking about the total cost of risk, and without going through the whole light bulb demonstration again, we basically talked about how a burned-out light bulb is not just a burned-out light bulb. It can result in a darkened stairwell where a teacher can fall and get hurt. That results in hard and soft costs, such as the medical and indemnity costs, also substitute employees and increased insurance premiums. And then you have your hidden costs, the loss of an effective educator, the loss of educational opportunity for students, which will follow them through the rest of their educational career and through life. But I've also spoken throughout this process that risk is not just hazard or downside. It's also opportunity. And so what I want you to do is to start thinking about the total cost of risk as being an opportunity as well. You still have your light bulb in your stairwell, but now you're spending money to maintain that stairwell, to keep the lights on, to keep the handrails fastened, to keep the walkways safe. And that's going to start costing you money. You've got hard and soft costs associated with it, but what you also have at that moment is you start getting decreased insurance premiums for having safer buildings where you're having fewer injuries. And you also start having hidden costs there, such as improving the educational opportunity for your students. And isn't that the core mission of schools? So with that in mind, trying to find ways to get the total cost of risk realized as an opportunity, we start talking in terms of the possibility of setting up what's called a gain share program. Excuse me. A gain share program is an opportunity for schools to enjoy the benefits of having a safer school. If we can save money, because we're not spending money on substitute teachers due to avoidable accidents, if we're not having to spend money on repairing schools for major losses, that money could be used for the schools. And so we need to create the opportunity or the upside risk. We need to give them a chance to be incentivized to help with us, and that's the gain share. The way it would take place is you have to build your case. You have to show your schools, show your community that we're spending an awful lot of money on our losses. And these are our hard costs. Again, you then talk about the soft costs as well. And that creates the need. You then fill your need by talking about how do you establish a gain share. And you say, if we can save a certain amount of money, I'll split the savings with you. I can't put in a number because I have schools that are as small as 150 students. I have schools that go $8,000 to $10,000, or 8 to 10,000 students listening into this program right now. I work with schools that have 20 and 30,000. So the number is a movable number. It also depends on what your losses are. But you say if we can reduce our losses by a certain dollar amount, and if the school will meet certain criteria, for instance, we'll look at each school like we look at each car owner and their driving record, or each homeowner and their home. And we'll figure out what your goal should be. It's got to be an achievable goal. Otherwise, you're not going to get buy-in. You then say you have to set up a safety committee, and that safety committee has to meet at least once a month for 9 months of the school year. You have to report all accidents within 3 days of learning of the accident, regardless of whether somebody got hurt or not. And we're going to come back to that aspect. That's called near miss. And we need to know near miss so that way we can plan for potential harm. And finally, you have to commit to getting your injured employees back on the job within 2 days of a doctor releasing them either for full duty or for part duty or light duty. Within that time period, you need to get them back in. And if you do all that, we'll share in the profits with you. You can set it up by saying, for instance, if we can reduce our cost by $100,000, $25,000 will be put into a pot or into an account, and it will be divided up by the schools who qualified for the program. At 150, you can raise the reward. At 200,000, you can again raise the award. What we've done is, as we've spoken earlier, we've established achievable expectations. We've given them goals, and the higher the goal, the greater the reward. This is the flow chart. If you hit that $200,000 savings that you were looking for, $80,000 would be put into the pot, and it would be divided up. If only one school qualified, they just got themselves a check for $80,000. If it were 8 schools, it would be the $80,000 divided by the 8 schools, or $10,000. At the 150 level, you can see how it breaks out. 100,000 level, you see how it breaks out. If you didn't make the mark, then there's no payment involved. Here are the savings that you are going to actually realize. $120,000 may be your sports program. It may be the difference in saving your sports program or having to let it go because your budget just isn't there this year. $75,000 or $100,000 may be a teacher. That's the value of this program. If you, of course, have larger losses, you have larger gains available. Idea number 2, establish a return-to-work program. The return-to-work program is one of the key parts of your gain share. But even without a gain share, this program is a critical part of a risk management program. Here are some statistics. Nearly 30% of all people who will get injured on the job will lose days from work. This year in New York State, if your teacher is out, if your building engineer is out, you could be paying over $800 a week to them while they're out. It's a sliding scale depending on their salary, but you could be looking at an exposure of $800 per week per injured employee. The chances of them returning to work diminish as time goes on. As soon as the worker hits 26 weeks, their chances of coming back to work in any employment is reduced to 50%. That means you will be paying up to $800 a week for them to not work while you have to now go pay to bring somebody else into the classroom. There's the reason why you want to get people back to work. A return-to-work program, people always believe that the injured person doesn't want to come back to work. They do. They really do. They're suffering from loss of income to their family. They're losing their skills and their value. It's going to make it ever harder for them to get back into the workplace. The longer they're out, the slower their recovery becomes because they now start getting an emotional overlay. The isolation and depression of sitting home watching Oprah, and I don't mean to say that Oprah is a bad show to watch, but sitting around watching Oprah while everybody else is at work starts to really take its toll. And then as they start spiraling downward, they're not coming back up so quickly. They want to get back to work. You, on the other hand, want to save the money associated with having them out of work. You also don't want to suffer from the lost productivity by having to replace them with a temporary substitute worker. The return-to-work program has to be individualized. Whenever I say that, it usually makes people say, wait a second, I don't have the staff, I don't have the manpower to do something like that. The question is, how could you not have it? The School District of Philadelphia has 2,500 workers' compensation claims a year. The return-to-work program is run by the workers' comp manager and the director. And the director doesn't do a whole lot. The director is there to direct, to help get people over humps when the manager can't. So if a manager, if a single person or running other programs can do a return-to-work program for 2,500 injuries a year, surely you can get someone who can handle this too. It doesn't have to just be your employee. That's what your insurance company is supposed to be doing for you or with you. That's what your TPA is supposed to be doing for you or with you. Now, for the people who are new here today, the term TPA is third-party administrator. If you have a large enough program, then you may be self-insured or you may have such a large deductible that you take charge of the claims yourself. And more times than not, what you'll do is you'll hire a company who will handle those claims on your behalf. Another way it may take place is that if you're in a pool with other schools or other municipal organizations, you may be part of a group that uses a TPA. Your TPA should be putting together your return-to-work program, but you can't leave it to them to run it. You need to have the injured employee supervisor involved. You need to be involved in some fashion or somebody who's handling the risk management aspect. But these are the steps to a return-to-work program. Idea number 3, establish safety committees. Again, we've spoken about safety committees earlier on, the safety committee is the heart and soul of the risk management program, especially if you don't have a risk manager. And as I pointed out in the last webinar, you probably don't need a risk manager. What you need is a risk management committee. And that risk management committee, the heart and soul of that committee is the safety committee. As far as safety committees, just to give you an idea that this isn't a newfangled idea, 20 years before the steel workers had unionized, they were already having safety committees. The idea of the safety committee hasn't changed that much in exactly 100 years. Your safety committee may not look like this, but what you should have on your safety committee, you should have the principal. You should have somebody who is in charge of transportation, a facility manager, school security, somebody representing the teacher's interests. A guidance counselor is important, but often overlooked. The athletics director and food services. These are the essential people in your organization that will be able to give you the different perspectives that you need. We're going to be talking in a little while about perspectives, or towards the end of the presentation, about your perspectives on risk management. These are the people that are going to help you to get the right perspective. You can also, as you're doing it, you should be thinking about adding some others. In the high school setting, perhaps somebody from the student government organization or president of the student body. They bring perspectives on risk that you may be missing. If you have an ombudsman, perhaps bring in local law enforcement because they can give you some extra insights on issues such as emerging gang activity. Perhaps somebody from the PTO can also provide some insights from family concerns about the risks at your school. This is your risk committee. Hopefully not quite that formal, but this is what you should be thinking about. Your safety committee can only function properly if it has a proper agenda. Otherwise, it becomes a coffee clutch. My suggestion is that you always start off by addressing accidents and near misses. The best way to understand the issue of a near miss is that if you, as the financial officer, were walking up the hallway and ceiling tiles fell and just missed striking you, you'd be marching back to your office instantly, calling a meeting and finding out what the heck is going on, why did that almost happen, what do we have to do to make sure it never happens again. We shouldn't have to wait till it's happening to you. We should be looking at when somebody nearly slipped on water. Why was there water on the floor? Why wasn't it addressed? That's what the committee should be starting with. The safety committee, along with the administration, should be setting annual safety goals. And at every meeting, they should be looking at what have we done to try to accomplish these goals? What do we need to do to make our marker? The rest speaks for itself, except towards the bottom. You should try to always have a 15-minute presentation or a half-hour presentation if you can afford the time to get new training. So that way you can discuss how do we deal with cold weather employment. This is something that the facilities people may need to know. This is something that transportation may need to know. This is something that the security people may need to know. You need to let them understand that you can't stay out in the cold too long. You have to come in and warm up, that there are certain precautions that we take. Same with hot weather. This is where those discussions come in. And you always want to end by setting up, making sure that everybody knows when the next day, time, and location for the meeting is going to be. If you don't set up another meeting, the meetings will end. The other thing is that you want to type up the minutes and hang them up where the faculty meets, where the employees meet, so that way everybody knows what's going on in the way of safety. You want to keep that forefront in their minds. Idea 4 is C.O.P.E. C.O.P.E is a technical concept it's really 4 of the 5 bases for what underwriters do when they're evaluating your property for purposes of insurance. It's an acronym that stands for the services that are provided. The first one is construction. Three little pigs. Is your house made of straw or is it made of brick? Depending on what it's made of, that's how you're going to get charged by your insurance company. Occupancy. Are we using it for a kindergarten or are we using it for a vocational school where we're doing automotive repair and there's gasoline and flammable liquids in the building? Protection. They look to see, do you have a sprinkler system? Do you have fire hydrants in front of the school or fire stands built into the school? How close is your local fire department? Is it a paid professional group, or is it, as they call them in the fire department world, whoopies, who are volunteers who may or may not show up? And finally, exposures. What are the buildings around you? Perhaps you have a very safe school, but there is a firecracker company, a firecracker store selling fireworks right next to your school. So these are the things that they're looking at. How does it help you? This is how the report will look when they deliver it to you. But if you're working with the people who are doing your appraisals, they can do a more in-depth process for you. And as they're doing that in-depth process, they can start talking to you about the C.O.P.E issues. When they're checking what is your building made of, they're walking around on the roof. If they notice that your roof is soft, if they notice that the flashing is no longer sealed against the building, they can notify you of this before you lose the roof, before it gets peeled off in a storm, before you start getting water infiltration that results in the walls inside your building starting to collapse or developing mold issues. Occupancy. When they're looking at the occupancy, how is the building being used, they can notice and advise you that you have flammables, you have the gasoline for the weed whacker downstairs in the boiler room. And yes, I've seen that a number of times. They can give you these heads up so that you can improve your school. Insurance will replace the school for the most part. But what happens if the school is taken offline for 18 months, 2 years, 3 years? That interrupts your core mission. By looking at your C.O.P.E reports and by going through the appraisal system, you can find out the quality of your building and what you need to do to make it safer and to guarantee that you accomplish your core mission. Idea 5, there's more speculative risk than pure risk. I've noticed that we have a couple new people on today, so I just want to very quickly touch on it. Pure risk versus speculative risk is the idea that risk is not all bad. There's upside risk that we call opportunity. And again, think of risk as buying a lottery ticket. I'm risking $2, $4, $5. I'm also risking the upside of winning $1 million or winning $50, whatever it may be. That's upside risk. Pure risk is Superstorm Sandy. When it hits, I'm only going to realize devastating losses, major losses, moderate losses, minimal losses, or no losses. There's no upside to it. 4 webinars ago, when we started speaking about risk, I'm sure that everybody's thinking risk was similar or synonymous with hazard. And I think we are now at the point where we realize, no, it also means opportunity. I want you to realize there's more opportunity out there than you realize. And a lot of it you've already been living with. The simple one that I'm sure most people are aware of is the concept of storm flooding for your school. 40 years ago, you didn't have to worry about it. But now with all the development that's taken place upstream and all the impervious cover that is brought, water is going into the river, accumulates as it's coming down the river, and by the time it gets to your school, it overflows the banks, and you're having more and more flooding issues with your school. As you sit down and you do your prioritization or your risk map, it comes in as an orange, as a medium high. You stop and you look at your risk management strategies. Acceptance is not working. It's too costly each time. Transferring through insurance is getting progressively more expensive and may soon become out of reach. They may just say, we're not going to insure that. It really comes down to mitigation. If you're looking at straight mitigation, you may think in terms of just a drainage system or a pumping system to get the water further down the road. But now that you realize that there's a thing called speculative risk, that you can turn this into an opportunity, you can start thinking about using the water mitigation funding to develop a large basin instead of a deep basin, a shallow but large basin, and turn that into an extra soccer field or football field or track field. Now, granted, you're going to have a couple times when you're not going to be able to use the field because it's going to get flooded. But all the other times, you've got yourself an extra field to work with. That's taking a risk and turning it into an opportunity. So the point is, think in terms of speculative risk. Whenever you have a situation that makes you think in terms of risk, start thinking in terms of upside as well as downside risk. Idea number 6 is understand risk. Sounds easy enough, and we've talked about how you understand risk. But I want to go through an exercise with you based on the fact that I'm working with people who have an appreciation for numbers. I'm starting from the point that I'm going to prove to you that risk is not intuitive. Very simple game. There's 4 cards. Excuse me. I've got 2 aces and 2 kings. We're going to play a little game. The game goes as follows. You're going to give me you have the opportunity to give me $20, non-refundable, and then I'm going to shuffle the 4 cards. I'm going to lay out the 4 cards, and you'll flip 2 cards. I'll let you flip the other 2 afterwards to show you that I don't specialize in 3-card or 4-card Montes. But you're going to flip 2 cards. If you get 2 aces, I'm going to hand you $60. If you get either an ace and a king or a king and an ace, I'll give you $30. And if you get 2 kings, you're going to pay me another $18. Question number 1, are you willing to take the risk? This is what we've already defined as risk appetite. Now, $20 isn't a whole lot of money, so most people that I present this to, except when I'm presenting it to college students, are willing to take the risk. Okay, we move on to the next step. What are your chances of drawing 2 aces? Now, whenever I'm presenting this to a live audience, well, I mean, you're live, but I mean live and sitting in front of me, I'll ask that question and I'll have people raise their hands. Generally, the first person who raises their hand says, my chance of getting 2 aces is 1 in 4. How many people agree? And traditionally, the number is around 70 to 75% say that your chances are 1 in 4, or 25%. In fact, you've got 6 different possibilities. You only have 1 possibility of pulling 2 aces. All the others are pulling either an ace and a king or 2 kings. So right there, you've already missed your calculation for frequency. Remember, the point is, risk is not intuitive. You thought you understood your risk, but here's your real risk. You don't have a 25% chance of getting the $60 back. You only have a 16 or 17% chance. Okay, let's go back to our game. Question 3. What is your maximum net gain and maximum net loss? Again, as I've done this presentation in the past, I usually land up with 12% just looking at the numbers and saying the spread is 16 to 18. They forgot that they already are into the game for $20. 68% will apply that $20 admission fee to the downside, but they keep overestimating their gain, their opportunity, their upside risk. The real answer is that the most I have to lose is 38. The most I have to gain is 40. We're talking about severity now. The severity of the win or the severity of the loss. Now, I've got to be honest, I've simplified this a bit because of the fact that you can go into statistics and find that the numbers are really a little bit different. Risk management, though, is not intuitive. It's something you need to work at if you want others to work at it. What that means is that you need to take the opportunity and take the time to listen to webinars or to read books on very specific risk management topics and how to address them. So, how do you think you did? Which two were you going to flip? Hopefully somebody won big that time. In the last webinar, as you'll recall, I showed you a set of numbers and showed you how the new risk manager was doing a fabulous job, that they had lowered the costs associated with snow and ice claims, and that those numbers in and of themselves told the whole story. And then showed you, no, they really didn't. That the real story was told with the numbers that they weren't measuring. And that's why numbers shouldn't matter, but rather you should have a better process for evaluation and for setting up programs. That those numbers weren't driven by a great program. Those numbers were driven by great weather, or at least unseasonably warm and dry weather. So I kept pushing that process is what matters. That the process is going to drive the outcome. But I'm here to also tell you that you need to know, and you need to gather, and you need to understand and study those numbers. This is an actual case study that I'm working on right now with a school district. The situation is that the school district is entering into a moment now where they're about to go out on an RFP for TPA services. They already have a third-party administrator, but their contract has expired or is coming up on expiration, and they're going out for an RFP. They want me to help them draft the RFP, and they also want me to sit on the committee evaluating the responses. I asked to see the last stewardship report, and this was what the stewardship report revealed, that the program looks like it's been doing really, really well. I found out that the jump between year 1 and year 2 was a new risk manager who instituted new processes, new programs, and that there's been a steady drop, but that the new risk manager who came in at the end of year 6 has gotten another big jump downward. They wanted to know, based on these numbers, what should they be looking at in the next contract, in the next RFP. I told them that I don't think I have enough information. I need to see what's driving those numbers. They didn't have it in their report. They didn't have enough information. TPAs, insurance companies, are not all the same. Some of them will give you just enough data to show that they're doing a great job. That's what happened here. It turns out that the reason for the big drop may be associated with the fact that they had a number of major layoffs in the last few years. Because even though the program costs have come down, the number of employees are coming down faster. So that means there's fewer employees theoretically having accidents. This would seem to damn the TPA. It doesn't. I told them that even this, and by the way, I had to work very hard to get the TPA to run these numbers. If your TPA or if your insurance company isn't able to or unwilling to run these numbers, you need to know that up front, because then you can't run a risk management program with them involved. Anyways, once we got these numbers out of them finally, I then had to push for some new numbers, some additional numbers. And what I found out was, if we started taking the amount of cost and dividing it by the number of employees, The last 3 years where we're seeing drop down, actually the numbers are going up as a cost per employee. This appears to be problematic, but even this number is deceptive, and it's hurting the TPA unnecessarily. Finally, we got to the numbers we needed. What we did was we said, let's look at the accidents that have happened this year and compare them to the accidents that have happened on a yearly basis. To make this easy, let's call it a calendar year. If I have a devastating injury, let's say one of my maintenance people has a devastating injury, a spinal injury, on December 31st while shoveling the walk in front of the school, that's not going to show up in this process. The person who got hurt January 1st, we're going to get to see all the numbers, all the treatment from January 1st to December 31st. But we lose that guy from December 30th, December 31st. Their indemnity hasn't really matured. But at least it's consistent year by year. Every year we lose that late accident. I hope that makes sense to you. But as we look at that, we see that the cost is going up per employee, even after we stripped out other numbers. The reason the green numbers are so much higher than the orange numbers, somebody got hurt 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, 20 years ago, we're still paying them every week. We're paying their medical. We're paying their indemnity. I just have fewer employees working at that time, at the new time, while I still have all these legacy cases. That's why the green is so high in distorting my numbers. But as we looked at the orange line, we realized we don't have a program. And the reason we don't have a program is because we don't have a TPA, or we don't have an insurance company, in this case the TPA, giving us our information. Why am I spending all this time explaining the numbers? Because once we saw those numbers, then we started looking at the files. And as we started looking at the files, we started seeing things. Men get hurt more than women do. That they get hurt, that a certain age bracket gets hurt more often than others. That older employees cost more. That they're out of work longer. And then we started looking at why. We started looking at the drivers. Older employees are out because their injuries are usually worse, and they've got comorbidities. They have diabetes, which means that they're not going to heal as quickly. They have osteoporosis, which means they're not going to heal as quickly. That's when we start saying, okay, now that we know what our numbers are, now that we understand our numbers, now that they make sense, now we can build the program that's right for this particular job. We had some other findings too. One of the interesting findings was the fact that we had the 25 to 35-year-olds, the 35 to 45-year-olds were having more multiple accidents. That is, I've had my second, my third, my fourth accident. Part of it was failure to use safety equipment. Part of it was failure to follow safety protocols. But some of it was suspected fraud. Now, fraud is the bane of the program's existence. But really, it's only about 2%. From what I've seen and from all the studies, it's really only about 2%. But it allowed us to say, okay, we need to focus on that as well. The point is, you need to get numbers, you need to get good numbers, so that way you can develop a proper process. Idea number 8. Risk management is more than just claims management. Now, as far as this concept, I know that we've spent an awful lot of time talking about damage to building or losses of building. I know we've talked a lot about insurance. We've spoken a lot about injuries and how injuries have the hidden cost of impacting the education of students. That's all claims work. You need to think, again, that risk management is a much bigger process. For instance, you're aware of the financial risk management. You understand the problems with making sure that a budget holds together. You're familiar with the problems involved in making sure that you have consistent funding sources and adequate funding sources. So I don't need to talk to you about all financial risk. What about communication risk? Communication risk is a very interesting one. If you have your general counsel take the microphone, general counsel can sing happy birthday because no one's really listening to him except for the people involved in a legal process. When general counsel takes that microphone and saying, this is the most important legal issue on my plate, I'll see you in court. When the chief financial officer takes the microphone, it's because he's talking to the funding sources. In your case, he's talking to Albany, or she's talking to Albany. She's talking to Washington, D.C. She may be talking to the local elected officials, or trying to influence people as the budget process is beginning and there's going to be an election on the budget. Supply chain risk management. You already have that in place, but you may not be thinking of it formally as supply chain, and therefore you may be giving it short shrift. Supply chain, do I have enough substitutes? First, do I have enough teachers to open the school year? But after I open up the school year, do I have my substitutes in place? Do I have a process that if my teacher's not coming in, I have a substitute who is coming in? What about those cartons of milk? Yes, we've got it set up that all those cartons of milk arrive every day, every other day, once a week, whatever your process is. Well, what would happen if right after it was delivered, somebody from the dairy supply house called and said, listen, don't use those cartons. We just found out that there's salmonella in the plant. Do you have a backup plan on how you would make sure the kids were getting their milk, the kids were getting their food? You have processes. You're trying to make sure that the books are arriving on time, heating oils arriving on time. This is all supply chain. The question is, how fully developed is your supply chain risk management program? That's something you need to think about very carefully. The next one is your reputation. Reputation risk management in the for-profit world is the #1 risk management concern of CEOs and CFOs. They're concerned about their brand. Think in terms of Tylenol. That Tylenol scare happened over 30 years ago, and the moment I said Tylenol, probably 95% of you knew what I was saying. In fact, there may be some of you listening in right now who weren't alive when the Tylenol scare took place, and you still are aware of it. The Edsel was a wonderful car, but they had a couple minor problems with it, and the reputation was destroyed instantly. Your reputation is important because it goes to your funding sources. If the population does not feel that your school is succeeding, they don't want to vote for your budget. They're not going to approve your budget. If colleges, universities, vocational schools hear that your school is not a very good school, that there's grade inflation, that your numbers really aren't that good when you look at state scores, you're going to have a hard time getting your kids placed. Your reputation is everything. And so you really need to think in terms of reputational risk management. IT risk management is a critical point. IT is your lifeline. What are you doing to make sure that your programs aren't being violated, that your walls aren't being violated? These are risk management issues that you need to think about, because realistically, as the CFO or in the CFO's office, you really are the chief risk officer as well. The last one is political risk management. Political risk management can be everything from what we're going through right now with Washington closing down, and therefore schools are going to start feeling the pinch. Some schools are feeling the pinch right away. If you are a school tied to a military base, you may have had to close your school already 2 days into this crisis because the funding was shut off. What happens when Washington adopts No Child Left Behind? You have to change your processes, your protocols, your very existence because of that. What happens when Obamacare starts taking hold? Did you have to make new plans on that these political changes impacted your budget? That's political risk. How do you manage it? One way is that you have organizations that you are members of that try to make sure that anything that is taking place is being monitored so that you can be advised on what the changes will mean to you. It also means that you are trying to influence your legislators to pass laws that give you opportunities instead of creating hazards. Number 9, embrace your inner risk taker. We all take risks. As you'll recall, in our last webinar, I had set up that you should be trying to find opportunities. You should be encouraging people to take risks. Somebody comes up with an idea, and I gave the process for how do you refine the idea so that it can become a reality. And I showed how each one had other steps in it where you prioritize the issues or you inventory the issues that can come up, you prioritize them, and then you use your risk management strategy to either lower the hazard or increase the opportunity. And the blue dot was, or the blue button was the measurement. We keep measuring our results. And I showed, that was when I started saying to you that the numbers that you start applying for frequency and for severity aren't really haphazard numbers. There are ways of calculating the numbers. And before I showed you how to calculate them, I referred to the third webinar where I glazed over it real fast and then came back to it and said, okay, this is how you calculate the numbers. And I apologize to you because I didn't tell you that at the front end. Well, I'm here to apologize again. And the reason why is I gave you a very good system for calculating the numbers. The only problem is that other than relationships, personal relationships, risk has the highest degree of emotional drive or psychological impacts that are driving your decision-making process. A good example is, look at our kids. Our kids know the problems with smoking. Our kids are taught the harms of drugs, the risks associated with sex. And yet our kids engage in these activities, and they do it in the riskiest way possible. They know from a number standpoint, from an intellectual standpoint, from a data-driven standpoint, what the truth is, and yet they make bad decisions. The reason why is because they are emotionally driven. They're being pressured into making a decision by their peer groups. Well, we do the same thing as adults. I'm sure there's somebody listening in who's gone out to, maybe not recently, but in a dating situation, their date ordered something that they would never touch in 1,000 years, and the date turned to them and said, you got to try this yak stew. It's the best I've ever had. And every fiber of your soul is saying, I'm not touching that. And then you put it in your mouth. The reason why is because you are being emotionally driven. Your psychology is the part that's driving you, not your numbers. So when I say embrace your inner risk taker, I want you to realize that there's a psychology behind it. One of the thought leaders in this field of risk management psychology is a Dr. Deepak Chopra. I hope I'm not ruining his name too badly. But he raises 7 points about the psychology of risk and how did you plug your numbers in to decide your frequency and your severity. He starts off by saying you need to know your anxiety level and be honest about it. What is driving your fear or your concern that made you realize this is a moment of risk? What's stopping you from taking advantage of the opportunity? Next, be patient with your emotional reactions. When I arrived at the school district of Philadelphia, I found out that they had a policy of no swimming. The kids are not allowed to go swimming outside of the swimming pools that are located in some of the schools. That no trip could involve swimming, and they also had eliminated taking kids up to the summer camps that are out in the country. Philadelphia you've got some beautiful parks there, but you really don't have forests. You don't have camps per se. So they like to take the kids at the end of the year as a reward for making it through the year up to summer camps before the summer camps open up for the season. One senior class went up to one a number of years back, and everybody had a great time until one girl decided not to, one woman decided not to. She was the woman who was at the bottom of the pool, not breathing. They medevaced her out, and immediately the school district said, we will not allow any more of these trips. We will not allow any swimming outside of our pools with our lifeguards. It was an emotional reaction to an emotional event, and it took the change of administration, or maybe a couple changes of administration, and the change of risk managers, excuse me, and the change of risk managers to get that revisited. And we realized that, no, we can have these trips. It just has to be managed better. That's what I'm saying. Be patient with your emotional reactions. Be rational, but don't be fooled that reason can defeat risk. The best example I give of that is we had a race riot in one of our schools in Philadelphia. And the immediate reaction was that we needed to put in more cameras into the school, that the cameras would stop the fights. I've never seen a camera stop a fight. A police officer can stop a fight. A district employee may stop a fight. A camera doesn't. A camera may notify the police that a fight is breaking out, but somebody's got to be watching the monitor. And the more cameras you have, the more monitors you have. A camera can document what happened so that afterwards you can address the issue. But the camera isn't going to stop the fight. You have to be rational in your thought process. You have to really look at root causes. Remember, we spoke about that. Gather as much useful information as possible. A little demonstration I did before where I showed you that the TPA was giving just the information they wanted you to have to make them look good so that they could position themselves to win the RFP. They didn't give as much useful information as possible. And without the useful information, you would have come to a different decision. To show you how decision-making and information works, let's go back to our card game for a moment. As you'll recall, you had two choices. I'm not going to take the risk, and I'm not going to have any reward or further losses. Or I am going to take the risk, realizing I have a downside risk and an upside risk. This is what the process was presented to you as. We later realized that since we had $20 in the game, if we had gone the route of taking the risk, the numbers were actually a little bit different. But here's a new way of playing the game. What we're going to do is we're going to say, can we get a risk management strategy involved in this overall process? And so what you do is you say, you know, we can buy a mitigation strategy. Oops, hold on. Sorry about that. I think we just, what happened here? I do apologize. There we go. We can buy a risk management or a risk mitigation strategy for $6. What the mitigation strategy is that we're going to hire someone who's going to make the determination for us of what the first card is. That information could become very valuable, but it's going to cost me $6. So now I have a new chain. Do I want to pay the $6 for a mitigation strategy? If no, I drop to the lower one, and then do I want to be involved in this process? I may say, you know, I don't mind risking the $20, but I don't want to throw another 6 into the game. But the 6 is at the very beginning. You may say, yes, I want to mitigate my position. Well, now if you do that, you stand to lose even more money, and you stand to gain even less money. But okay, we went ahead, we hired the person, and that person found out that your first card is going to be a king. We hired somebody to flip the card over for us before we bet. They determined your first card is a king. We now know there's no chance of getting the $34. We now also know that while we have a lot more chances of winning, our win is only going to be a $4 net gain. Our loss is a net loss of $44. And when presented like that, just about everybody walks away from the game. They cut their losses at 6%, at $6, excuse me. They say, I'm not taking the risk. On the other hand, our hired expert comes back and says, the first card is an ace. Well, now I know that I'm not going to sustain any losses. That is pure gain. It's, do I want to gain a little, or do I want to gain a lot? And you know something? Even though it's just a little, it was the same little as a moment ago, that little is a guaranteed gain. Now I'm definitely going to stay in the game. So more information becomes better for us, even if it comes at a cost. Number 5, take in other points of view. Do you remember when we put together our safety committee? We had somebody from every major aspect of our core mission. We had the transportation people. We had the facility people. We had the food service people. We had everybody in, because you can't possibly know what the teachers are thinking in their classrooms, what the principals are having to deal with, what the facility managers are dealing with. You can't know it with the granularity that they have. Number 6, don't trust the crowd. They're fickle. The crowd is falling into what the H.L. Mencken once said. He said that for every problem, there's an obvious, simple solution, and invariably it's the wrong one. The crowds will jump, unfortunately, too often, jump to a simple answer, a naive answer. You need to take the time to follow along to make sure you get Number 7, don't believe that trends are the same as certainty. This is where numbers always fail us. We look at numbers, forgetting that numbers are the past. We're trying to use the past to predict the future. For those of you who like following sports, your sports team has now won 3 games in a row, 3 weeks in a row. They're coming up against a team who's now lost 3 games in a row. And so, according to the trend, you might as well bet the house on this one. The thing that the trend didn't show you is that the other team lost 3 games because their star quarterback had been out, and their star quarterback is now back, and is back in full power. Don't follow the trend. Use the trends to guide you. Number 10, make friends with risk. When we started this whole process, risk was hazard. It was something to be avoided, something to be conquered. We now know that risk really is both opportunity and hazard. Look to the opportunity. There are tools for addressing both the opportunity and the risk, and they're the same tools. And most importantly, in the words of JFK, who sums it up as well as anybody I've ever heard sum up the issue of risk management. There are risks and costs to action, but they are far less than the long-range risks of comfortable inaction. That sums up the whole program that I'm hoping that you've been able to get from us. At this point, I do want to take a moment just to thank Lee for all of his help and guidance through this process. Also, Tom Austin, who's been able to help us through this process and give us guidance. Matthew for making sure that the programs actually would get out to everybody. And Jacqueline McAllister for all of her help in making sure that these programs got out to you. And at this point, I would open up to any questions that anybody may have on this or any of the other webinars or on any other topics that, of risk that may be on your mind.
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff. If anyone has any questions for Jeff, please feel free to hit the raise hand button, use the chat screen, or the Q&A window on your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll give you just a few seconds here to go ahead and do that.
And Matt, while this is Lee again, how's everybody doing? I wanted to jump back in here and thank Jeff one more time as we try to get any other questions. I think we have another guest on the line today. Tom Austin, are you still with us?
Yes, I am, Lee. Am I coming through?
Well, you're coming through. I just want to invite you, since you've kept this webinar series going and helped us out, I want to thank you for all your efforts. And if you had any comment while the participants are thinking of questions, maybe there's something you'd like to say, if anything.
Well, I think it certainly has been enlightening and presents a different view. From my school business experience over the years, we really have seen risk as a hazard. And I think it's been very helpful through the series to show examples of how it can be something on the other side of the coin and can be a risk area, a reward area too. And I think, to me, I take a lot away from that kind of discussion through the seminars that have been presented. So I think it definitely opens up to consider some new aspects when you're considering hazards, risks, and choices in your school district.
I do see that there is a question from somebody, but I can't get the question to open up. Matthew, maybe you are able to or can ask the person to state it.
Yes, let's see here. My screen's kind of funky as well. Just a comment from Cassandra Ingham. She says, thank you, Jeff. Very informative program today. Nicely tied it all together.
Oh, thank you very much.
Matt, I think
And with that, we have no other questions.
And in fact, that really means a lot that she said that. Cassandra, for you folks, if you don't know Cassandra, she's one of the thought leaders in this field as well. She's with Utica Mutual, and she's one of the thought leaders in school risk management. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Matt.
Last thing,
thank you all for attending. We all appreciate it. If anyone wants to view a rebroadcast of all this, it is available on our website under Events, Webinars. You do have to be a member to view that. So thank you all again. We appreciate it.
If anybody has any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. Whatever I can do to help answer or direct you, I'll be more than happy to. This is my contact information. Again, thank you, everybody, for your participation. I hope that you've walked away gaining some valuable knowledge from these webinars.
Okay, great, everyone. Thank you, and have a great day.